Welcome to the Mindset Mechanics Podcast with Juan and Ladybug Jenkins. It's not too late to find, face, and fix what's stalling you. The shop is open, so pull on in.
Welcome to Mechanical Monday. You are in the shop. I am Ladybug Jenkins, your mindset mechanic, reminding you that it's not too late to find, face, and fix what's stalling you. And when you do that, acceleration is inevitable. In today's episode titled Safety First, we are going to discuss the importance of mental health, but how it affects the men in our lives. Now, mental health is defined as a person in this, instance, a man's condition in regards to his psychological and emotional well-being. So we are going to talk a little bit about what that looks like in real life. So if you tuned in last week to the episode entitled Guardrails, we talked about fathers and how they keep us safe, physically, spiritually, financially, you name it. And I shared a story about some abuse that I suffered at the hands of a young man at school and how my father literally showed up and did something about it. But, that's covered in the Guardrails episode. So anyway, if you didn't already know, June is Men's Mental Health Awareness Month, which I think is excellent. And while it's normal for you to be wondering, where's Juan? Why is he not running this episode? But I'm here to discuss, but the end result I want is to challenge the women around the men. And so while I am honoring the men, it is Men's Mental Health Awareness Month. Father's Day just passed. And so while I honor the men, I want to challenge the women who love the men, who are related to the men, who are in relationship with the men in this area. And so as wives and mothers, girlfriends, daughters, we are given the space and the grace to be emotional. If we cry, if we scream, if we throw something, if we lash out, if we stomp our foot. Everyone doesn't approve of it, but it's expected. I should say it's allowed. That is a better word. It is allowed. We are allowed to express our emotions. We are allowed to lash out. We're allowed to have a bad day, to be in a bad mood, yet without the roof caving in on us. And while things are getting better in some regards, and first of all, men are allowed to have emotions now. There was a time I can think back to when I was young that men just didn't have emotions unless your mom and your dog died on the same day. You were not allowed to express any sadness, any depression, any tears, any loss. You would see a man crying at a funeral, the funeral of someone close to him. But that was about it. There had to be some major thing going on. And aside from that, men were in some sects of society, they are still expected to deal with their emotions internally. And unpopular opinion, I do personally believe a lot of the drug and alcohol abuse, a lot of the, how do I say it, the bed hopping that we see with men of various ages, it is a form of dealing with mental health issues. It is a form of dealing with grief. It is a form of dealing with loss. They are dealing with it in ways that are acceptable. And now, if you're saying that I'm wrong, I want you to imagine for a moment that you walk out of your front door to go to work. And you see a man, he's about 35 years old, and he is sitting on the curb crying like a baby. You don't see any visible wounds, anything like that. He's just crying and he's blubbering. You can't understand what he's saying. Now, I want you to imagine later that evening, you walk into a bar with some coworkers and you see a 35-year-old man and he's had a few too many. He's not violent. He hasn't stripped all of his clothes off and stood up on the bar, but he's had a few too many, but he is laughing and he is telling a really funny story to his friends. Which one of those is more acceptable? Now, you may work in the mental health field. You may be a very liberated or progressive or forward thinking person. Maybe you read a whole lot of books. But the average person, which one of those men is more acceptable? Which one of those men has not lost any of his dignity? He has not lost any of his cool points, as it were. Which one of those men is still considered more manly? But the truth is, both of those men might very well be dealing with grief. They may be dealing with loss. They may have lost their job. They may have lost their spouse. Their dog may have died. They may have lost a parent. But one of those scenarios is more acceptable. The guy sitting on the curb, crying his eyes out like a 2-year-old, or a guy that's been with too many women. A guy who drinks too much. And that is what I want to talk about. But I want to talk to the wives, the mothers, the daughters, the aunts, the women around the men. And my challenge to you is not huge. My challenge to you is to simply say in private, maybe there's that moment in the kitchen where it's just the two of you and you get close enough where only he can hear you and you say, hey, are you okay? You know, I'm here to talk. No judgment, and it stays with me. That's the challenge. That's it. That's all. It's okay to not be okay. That extends to men as well. Now, I am the first to admit I am the daughter of a Southern belle. I am a very traditional, a very conservative woman. I do believe in traditional roles. I believe in men being men and women being women and children being children. So I am not talking about a man that cries at the drop of a hat. I mean, as a woman, I don't do that either. But I am not talking about an overly emotional man. I am not talking about a man that is not in control of himself. That is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the fact that men suffer loss. Men suffer grief. Men suffer depression. They deal with these things just like women do. And while their first thought may not be to lean on emotion, to call up a friend and yammer for an hour, because that might be something that, you know, as a rule, women tend to do. I'm saying that it's okay for him to cry if he's overwhelmed. It is preferable for him to cry than to run the streets. It's preferable for him to cry than to drink too much. It's preferable for him to cry as opposed to smoking cigarettes or marijuana. It is preferable for him to go to a therapist. Please, if you have a man in your life, you know he has unresolved trauma. You know his parents didn't treat him right. You know that he was abused. You know that he moved around too much. You know that he was called stupid. You know that he has wounds. And yes, now he's 40 years old and he's dressed nice and he goes to church on Sunday. He's a good father. He's a good husband. He does well at his job, but you know he has wounds. Send him to a therapist. There's help. Encourage him to go. Let him know that you won't judge him for going. And there is help. There's programs in almost every major city where help can be had for little to no money, depending on your circumstances. And just like you can call 911, if you feel you are, or you actually are in physical danger, medically, crime, violence, you can call 988. That is a .gov created number, 988, to get help. Yes, if you need it, but for the men in your life, for your husband, for your son, for your brother, your nephew, a guy on the job. If you know that someone's in trouble and you either don't have the relationship or you don't have the backbone to talk to them, write it on a Post-it note. Mental Health Hotline, 988. Stick it on their desk while they go grab coffee. Stick it on their desk while they go to get lunch. Stick it on their desk if you're in school and this is a situation where you're dealing with a classmate when they're not looking, if you can't talk to them face to face. But we are losing men. As society comes up against them, they expect them to do everything they're supposed to do, but then they don't support them. They want to treat them like robots with wallets. They're not allowed to have an opinion about their own children. God forbid they should get a divorce and they lose their children. They love their unborn babies too. There are men who love their unborn babies too. Before we had Noodle and Doodle, I suffered 2 miscarriages, and they were horrific. One was far worse than the other because I was further along. Those were Juan's children too. Those were his children too. Men have dreams for their children before they are born too. Our fathers, mothers, no, but love their children too. So keep those things in mind. Don't disregard them. Don't try to silence them. Don't tell them that being who God created them to be is toxic. That is creating, I believe, the rise in men's mental health issues because we are treating men like they are defective women, and we are judging them based on who women are supposed to be. And as a result, they are suffering psychologically and spiritually. And that is a shame, and it doesn't have to be. And I have been guilty of this. And I am confessing, but I have changed my ways. And, you know, we talk about the rear view mirror. We talk about hindsight. And I think about all of the men who suffer in silence when I talked about the man who drinks too much, the man who smokes weed, the man who runs from woman to woman, the man who has all of these cars, all of these clothes. He's always on the internet because he's compensating for the fact that he is broken inside. And you think about the men who have committed suicide. I remember seeing recently a clip of I believe he was a DJ on a talk show. And they showed this clip of him hours before he took his own life. And he was singing and he was dancing. Well, I believe he was dancing. He was doing some kind of, social media challenge where he was doing this little dance routine to a song. And his wife leaned into the clip and they were laughing. And shortly thereafter, he was gone. And you have men like Robin Williams. You have Kurt Cobain, Don Cornelius, Ernest Hemingway, Heath Ledger, George Reeves, who he literally portrayed Superman. Comedians, people whose job was to make us laugh. Anthony Bourdain, he wanted us to eat good. Kurt Cobain was a musician. Don Cornelius, music, dancing. Ernest Hemingway was a writer. Every walk of life. People who looked good, people who were attractive, people who had money, people who had fame. And it got so bad that they felt that they couldn't stay in this life. And I don't know what anyone else believes, but here in the shop, we believe in Jesus. Philippians 4:6-7 says, "Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus." Our men's minds need to be guarded. We need to let them know that we are there for them, that we love them, that they are good enough. No perfect man but Jesus, and he's now at the right hand of God. So make sure you're not holding the men around you to some impossible standard and at the same time telling them being a man is toxic. You can't cry. You can't grieve. You can't lay in the bed one day. You can't just be quiet and sit on the couch and stare off into space. You can't do that. But it's acceptable for you to drink. It's acceptable to smoke weed. It's acceptable to run with your friends. It's acceptable to play Call of Duty for 9 hours, never realizing that they are coping with serious issues. They can call 988. So can you. You can call a therapist. You can find one. We don't want to lose them. Losing them doesn't always mean they take their own life. Sometimes they're just checked out. Sometimes they are zombies who go to work and come home because that's all they can manage, because they are suffering from some serious trauma, things that happened to them when they were children. They deserve to be healed too. They deserve to be whole too. And when the men, another unpopular opinion, when the men are healed, when they are whole and they step into their rightful place, their God-given place, a lot of the things that bother the women in this world will start to fall into place. They will right themselves, because when the head is sick, good luck with the rest of the body. And that is what I wanted to share on this Mechanical Monday. Safety first. Thanks for stopping by the shop. I trust it helped. I'm Ladybug Jenkins, reminding you that it is not too late to find, face, and fix what is stalling you. Amen.
Thanks for stopping by the shop. Tune in next Mechanical Monday so you can get the tools to find, face, and fix your mindset and accelerate your life.